Your grandmother kept a jar of pennies on the kitchen counter, not because she was saving for anything in particular, but because a handful of coins still meant something in the 1960s. 5 cents bought a real thing, a cold bottle of something sweet, a stamp that carried your words across the country, a ride on the merry-go-round at the shopping center while your mother was inside picking up groceries. That jar is probably still sitting in a drawer somewhere, and the pennies are still in it, because today they will not buy you anything at all. One item coming up barely cost a dime on a hot summer afternoon, and today that same pleasure costs more than a full dinner did back then. Another one is something you probably still have in your kitchen right now, and the price difference will stop you cold. So hit subscribe and settle in, because here are 100 things that cost a nickel in the 1960s and a fortune today. Number 100. A stick of bubble gum. For most of the 1960s, a single piece of bazooka or double bubble cost 1 cent. A nickel got you a whole handful. The wrapper came with a tiny comic strip, and the flavor lasted about 30 seconds before it turned into something closer to chewing on a rubber band. But nobody cared. You shoved it in your pocket on the way to school, traded the comics with your friends, and chewed through 3 or 4 pieces by lunchtime. Walk into any convenience store today, and a single pack of gum runs $2 or $3. The penny piece is long gone, and so is the comic strip. The gum itself might last longer now, but the joy of walking up to a counter with 5 pennies and getting 5 pieces of bubble gum is something no modern packaging can replicate. Number 99. A first-class postage stamp. Through the late 1950s and into the early 1960s, mailing a letter cost 4 cents. By the middle of the decade, the price had crept to 5, and by 1968 it reached 6. People wrote letters to the editor about it. You bought your stamps at the post office window or from a small vending machine in the lobby, licked the back because the adhesive only worked when it was wet, and pressed it onto the corner of the envelope. For that handful of pennies, your letter traveled anywhere in the country, coast to coast, and arrived in a few days. Birthday cards, love letters, bill payments, thank you notes after Christmas. Everything moved through the mail because there was no other way to send a written word, and it cost almost nothing to do it. Today, a single stamp runs well over $50, and the volume of personal mail has collapsed to a fraction of what it was. The post office is still there, but the days when pocket change could carry your words across the country feel like they belong to a different world. Number 98. A local telephone call. Pick up the heavy black receiver, wait for the dial tone, spin the rotary dial, and talk as long as you wanted. That was how a home phone worked in the 1960s. Local calls were bundled into a flat monthly rate that worked out to pennies per conversation. You could call the neighbor, the school, the doctor, and the grocery store all in one afternoon, and it added nothing to the bill. A payphone on the street corner took a dime, and for that dime you got a few minutes of privacy inside a glass booth that smelled like cigarettes and warm metal. You could hear the coins drop when the call connected. Today, a basic phone plan runs $40 to $80 a month, and that is considered a reasonable price. The idea that a phone call was so cheap nobody even bothered to keep track belongs to an era most people under 50 have never experienced. Number 97. A cup of diner coffee. The waitress poured it from a glass pot that had been sitting on the burner since dawn. It came in a thick ceramic mug that could survive a drop from the counter. The refills were free, and the whole thing cost a nickel or at most a dime. You sat on a vinyl stool at the counter, read the paper, and nursed 2 or 3 cups before leaving a small tip on the saucer. Nobody asked how you wanted it prepared. Nobody wrote your name on the cup. The coffee was not single origin or cold brewed or poured over hand-ground beans. It was hot, it was strong, and it was practically free. Today, a plain cup of black coffee at most shops runs somewhere between $3 and $5. The free refills are not always guaranteed, and the dime tip on the saucer has been replaced by a screen that asks if you would like to add 20%. Number 96. A bottle of Coca-Cola. For decades, a bottle of Coke held steady at 5 cents. By the early 1960s, the price had started to climb. But in plenty of towns, you could still pull a cold glass bottle from a red machine for a dime. The bottle was heavy green-tinted glass with the logo embossed into the side, and you could feel the chill through the glass before you even popped the cap. The opener was bolted to the side of the machine, and the cap clinked into a small metal tray underneath. When you were finished, you returned the bottle to a wooden crate outside the store and got a couple of cents back. The whole transaction took less than a minute and lived entirely in the world of loose change. A single bottle from a vending machine today costs $2 or more. The bottles are plastic, the machines take cards, and nobody returns anything. The 5-cent Coke is as gone as the glass it came in. Number 95. A daily newspaper. 5 cents on weekdays. Maybe a dime for the thick Sunday edition with the color comics and the coupons. You bought it from a metal box on the corner by dropping your coins into a slot and pulling the front flap open. Pure honor system. Nobody stood there watching to make sure you only took one. You grabbed your copy, closed the door, tucked it under your arm, and walked to the diner or the kitchen table. Coffee, toast, and the front page cost less than a quarter combined. And that was how most of America started every single morning. The paper had local news, national headlines, the box scores, the classifieds, and Dear Abby, all for a nickel. A single copy of a major newspaper today costs several dollars, and a yearly digital subscription can run well over $200. The metal box on the sidewalk is mostly gone, and so is the idea that keeping up with the world cost less than a stick of gum. Number 94. A packet of Kool-Aid. 5 cents for a single envelope of powder that made an entire pitcher. You tore the top, dumped it into a big glass pitcher with water and a cup of sugar, stirred until the color bloomed, and suddenly you had enough for the whole family and half the neighborhood. Cherry, grape, orange, lemon, lime. The flavor was bright and artificial, and nobody pretended otherwise. It stained everything it touched. Your lips, your tongue, the counter, the inside of the pitcher. Mothers spent entire summers scrubbing grape Kool-Aid out of white t-shirts and never fully winning that battle. And nobody cared because 5 cents for an afternoon of cold drinks on a hot sidewalk was about the best deal in America. Today, a single packet costs close to $1, and the glass pitcher with the permanent purple stain inside has become a yard sale relic. The Kool-Aid man still crashes through walls in the commercials, but the nickel summer drink is behind him. Number 93. A carton of school lunch milk. Every school day, a small carton sat on the lunch tray. In most districts, that milk ran somewhere between 2 and 5 cents, and some schools included it free. The carton was waxed cardboard, half-pint size, and it came in 2 choices, white or chocolate. You peeled back the paper tab on top, and if you were lucky, the milk was cold. If you were not, it had a faint cardboard flavor that stuck with you for the rest of your life. School milk programs still exist, but the cost has shifted to budgets funded by tax dollars, and a half pint at a grocery store runs well over $1. That little carton with the folded top is one of those things every kid from that era held in their hands 5 days a week without giving the price a thought. Number 92. A handful of penny candy. The name told you the price before you even walked through the door. You stood in front of the glass case at the corner store, fogging it with your breath, and pointed at what you wanted one piece at a time. Mary Jane's, Bit-O Honey, wax bottles filled with colored syrup, root beer barrels, fireballs, Tootsie Rolls, jawbreakers that changed color as you worked through the layers. Every piece cost a penny or two. A nickel was serious spending power in front of that case. You studied the selection for 10 minutes, changed your mind 3 times, and walked out with a small paper bag that felt like buried treasure. The person behind the counter waited patiently because that was part of the job. Today, the closest equivalent is a bulk candy aisle at a big box store, where most pieces work out to 10 or 20 cents each. The glass case, the paper bag, and the patient shopkeeper who counted out your candy one piece at a time are all gone. Number 91. An hour on the parking meter. Drop a nickel into the slot, twist the handle, and the little dial clicked to life. Sometimes it bought you an hour, sometimes more, depending on the town. The meters were mechanical, painted gray or silver, standing in rows along every main street in America. You could see exactly how much time was left through a small glass window on the face, and the red violation flag popped up when you ran out. Every kid learned to spot that red flag from half a block away while their mother finished one last errand. A pocket full of nickels covered an entire afternoon of shopping, a stop at the bank, and a visit to the dentist with time to spare. Today, a single hour on a downtown meter costs $2 to $5. The meters accept credit cards, and the enforcement officers carry handheld scanners that know the second your time expires. The nickel meter with the little red flag is a museum piece now. Number 90. A box of Cracker Jack. 5 cents for a box of caramel-coated popcorn with peanuts, and inside every single box a small prize. A tiny compass, a magnifying card, a plastic ring, a temporary tattoo, a miniature spinning top. The prize was half the reason you bought it, and everybody knew it. You shook the box to feel where your prize was hiding, and you dug for it before eating a single kernel. The caramel corn was sticky and sweet, and it cemented itself to your back teeth, and that was perfectly fine because the entire experience, popcorn and prize included, cost a nickel. A box of Cracker Jack today runs close to $3, and the small plastic toy inside has been replaced by a QR code printed on a slip of paper that links to a digital game. The caramel corn survived the decades. The joy of pulling a tiny compass out of the bottom of the box did not. Number 89. A song on the jukebox. You stood in front of the machine at the back of the diner, flipped through the little cards listing every title, dropped a nickel in the slot, and pressed 2 buttons. The record dropped, the needle found the groove, and for 3 minutes the whole room heard what you picked. It was a public act. Everyone knew who chose the song. Pick well and you were a hero. Pick wrong and you heard about it. By the end of the decade, the price crept to a dime, and it was still a bargain for 3 minutes of control over an entire room. A song on most streaming platforms today costs over $1, and nobody around you knows or cares what you are listening to. The shared moment in front of the jukebox was worth more than the nickel ever was. Number 88. A tin of aspirin. Bayer sold a small flat tin that fit in a shirt pocket or a handbag and held about a dozen small white tablets. It cost roughly a dime. You did not need a prescription. You did not stand in front of a wall of 30 competing brands, and you did not spend 5 minutes reading the warnings printed in type so small you needed a magnifying glass. Headache, fever, sore muscles after a long day of work. Everything got the same answer. Pop the tin open, shake out 2 pills, swallow them with a glass of water, and move on. The aspirin worked the same whether the headache came from the sun, the kids, or the in-laws. Today, a bottle of brand name aspirin runs $5 to $10, and the pain relief section at the drugstore stretches from one end of the aisle to the other. The little flat tin is gone, replaced by child-proof bottles and labels that take longer to read than most headaches take to arrive. Number 87. A greeting card. Most cards at the drugstore in the 1960s ran between 5 and 15 cents. The fancy ones with glitter or a fold-out scene or a little window on the front might cost a quarter. They stood in spinning wire racks near the register, organized by occasion, and you could spend 15 minutes reading every single one before picking the right card for a birthday or an anniversary or a get-well wish. The verses inside said exactly what you could not figure out how to put into your own words, and for a dime that felt like a fair trade. You signed your name at the bottom, sealed the envelope, stuck on a 4-cent stamp, and the job was done for less than a quarter total. Today, a single greeting card averages $5 to $8, and the elaborate ones push past $10. A lot of people skip the card entirely now and just send a text, which costs nothing but somehow carries even less. Number 86. A wooden pencil. About a penny each, or a dime for a box of 12. They were yellow. They had number 2 stamped on the side in green or gold lettering, and every kid in America held one in their hand every single school day for years on end. You sharpened it with a hand crank sharpener bolted to the wall near the classroom door, turning the handle until the point was just right and the curled shaving dropped into the little box underneath. The smell of fresh shaved cedar was one of those quiet details of childhood that nobody noticed at the time but can recall instantly decades later. The pink eraser on top worked for about a week before it hardened into a gray smear that made things worse instead of better. A box of 12 today costs $3 to $5. The pencils still look the same, but the hand crank sharpener bolted to the classroom wall has joined the chalkboard and the inkwell in the long list of school fixtures that quietly disappeared. Number 85. A Saturday matinee at the movies. This was one of the great rituals of American childhood in the 1960s, and it cost almost nothing. A kid's ticket ran somewhere between a quarter and 50 cents. Popcorn was a dime. A soda was a dime. You could walk into the theater with $1 in your pocket and walk out 4 hours later having seen a double feature, a handful of cartoons and a newsreel, with change left over for the walk home. The theaters were palaces, velvet seats, heavy curtains that opened slowly when the lights dimmed, or Naya feelings that looked like they belonged in a building from another century. The floor was sticky with spilled soda and melted candy. The air smelled like butter and dust, and the darkness inside that theater on a bright Saturday afternoon felt like stepping into another world. You sat with dozens of other kids, all of them talking at the screen, throwing popcorn at the villain, cheering when the hero won. Parents dropped their children off at the door and picked them up 3 hours later without a worry. No cell phones, no check-in texts, no tracking apps. The understanding was simple. The movie house was safe, the kids were together, and everybody would be home before dinner. Today, a single movie ticket for a child runs $10 to $15. Popcorn is another $8. A soda is $6. A family of 4 can spend $70 or $80 on a single afternoon at the movies, and the double feature is gone, and the cartoons before the main attraction are gone, and the velvet curtains are gone. The theaters are multiplexes now, with stadium seating and digital projection and a rewards app on your phone. The movies themselves are bigger and louder than ever, but the Saturday matinee, the real one, where a kid walked in with a dollar bill and felt like the richest person in the building, that version disappeared a long time ago. Number 84. A loaf of white bread. Wonder Bread, or whatever the local store brand was, ran about 20 cents a loaf. It came sliced, wrapped in printed wax paper or a plastic bag, and it was soft enough to roll into a little ball with your fingers, which every child did at least once. That bread was the foundation of the American lunch. Peanut butter and jelly, bologna and mustard, grilled cheese on a Saturday afternoon. Nobody called it artisanal. Nobody asked where the wheat came from. It was white bread. It cost less than a quarter, and it fed a family for a week of sandwiches. A loaf of basic white bread today runs $3 to $4, and the fancy bakery loaves cost twice that. The bread aisle now has more options than most kitchens in the 1960s had total. Number 83. A gallon of gasoline. Roughly 30 cents in the early part of the decade, and at some stations it dipped below that. You pulled into the station and a uniformed attendant walked out to pump it for you. Cleaned the windshield with a squeegee, checked the oil under the hood, and topped off the tire pressure, all included in the price of the gas. Nobody swiped a card. Nobody pumped their own. A $5 bill filled the tank of most family sedans and left change for a cold drink at the next stop. Sunday drives were a weekend tradition because fuel was barely an expense worth thinking about. A gallon of regular gas today fluctuates between $3 and $5 depending on the week and the state, and the uniformed attendant who checked your oil with a rag over his shoulder has been replaced by a touchscreen that asks if you want a car wash. Number 82. A bar of ivory soap. A nickel, sometimes less, for a white bar that floated in the bathtub and did not pretend to be anything other than soap. Procter & Gamble had been calling it 99 and 44 100% pure since before anyone alive could remember seeing the first advertisement. Every household kept a bar in the bathroom dish and usually another at the kitchen sink. It smelled clean without smelling like anything you could name, and it did exactly one job without apology. It got dirt off skin, bath time, hand washing, scrubbing grass stains off a kid's knee. One bar handled all of it. Nobody needed a body wash infused with eucalyptus and activated charcoal. Nobody read the label because there was barely anything on it. Today, a multi-pack of ivory bars runs several dollars, and it shares shelf space with hundreds of alternatives that cost 3 times as much and promise the moon. The nickel bar that floated and smelled like nothing is still there, but the simplicity it represented is harder to find. Number 81. A pack of baseball cards. 5 cents for a pack of Topps cards in the early 1960s. You got 5 or 6 cards and a flat stick of pink bubble gum that shattered the moment you tried to bend it. The cards smelled like that gum, a dusty, sugary scent that anyone who collected them remembers the instant you mention it. You flipped through the stack hoping for a mantle or a maze, and mostly you pulled a backup catcher from a team you had never heard of. But every card went into the shoebox. The duplicates got clipped to your bicycle spokes with a clothespin so the wheel made a clicking sound when you rode. A pack of cards today runs $3 to $8. The gum is long gone, and some of those nickel cards from the 60s are now worth thousands. Number 80. A pocket comb. Every man carried one in the 1960s the same way he carried his wallet and his keys, back pocket, shirt pocket, or tucked into the sun visor of the car. A basic black plastic comb cost a nickel or less at any drugstore or 5 and dime. It was not a fashion accessory, it was a daily utility, like a handkerchief or a book of matches. You ran it through your hair before walking into church, before sitting down at a job interview, before stepping onto a front porch to pick up a date. The teeth were fine-spaced, the plastic was thin, and the whole thing snapped in half if you sat on it wrong. But at a nickel apiece, nobody cared, because you just walked into the nearest store and bought another one without thinking twice. Today, a basic comb costs about $1, which is one of the smaller price jumps on the whole countdown. The bigger disappearance is the habit itself, because carrying a comb everywhere you go is something almost nobody does anymore. Number 79. A box of Crayola crayons. The small box of 8 cost a dime, just enough colors to get through a coloring page without too many compromises. But the real prize was the big box, the one with 64 colors and a built-in sharpener in the back, that ran about $1, and owning it in the first grade made you royalty. You opened the lid and the smell hit you, warm wax and something almost like vanilla, the smell of a brand new school year. You peeled the paper label when the crayons got too short to hold, pressed too hard on the reds and blacks because those always broke first, and read the color names on the wrappers like they were words from some faraway place. Burnt sienna, raw umber, cornflower, thistle. A box of 64 today costs $5 to $7. The color names are still beautiful, but the thrill of cracking open that fresh box on the first morning of school is harder to find in a world where every kid already has a screen. Number 78. A pair of shoelaces. Cotton, usually. Black or white. Occasionally brown. A nickel at most shoe repair shops and 5 and dimes. You told the person behind the counter what length you needed. They pulled a pair from a drawer, slid them into a small cellophane sleeve, and you paid your nickel and laced them up right there on the bench. Shoelaces broke constantly because cotton frays and wears through, especially on kids who dragged their feet or tied knots too tight. But nobody lost a minute of sleep over it because replacing a pair of laces cost less than a piece of candy. You kept a spare set in the junk drawer at home the way you kept extra fuses and rubber bands. Today, a pair of basic laces runs $2 to $4, and the selection includes waxed, reflective, elastic, no tie, and patterned in every color you can imagine. The nickel pair that came in 2 colors and wore out every couple of months has turned into its own product category that would have baffled anyone standing at that counter in 1964. Number 77. A can of Campbell's soup. About 10 cents for a can of tomato soup in the 1960s. Chicken noodle cost the same. And cream of mushroom ended up in every casserole in every kitchen in America, regardless of what the original recipe actually called for. You grabbed the can from the pantry shelf, opened it with a hand crank opener, dumped the contents into a pot, added 1 can of water, stirred for a few minutes, and dinner for one was done. 10 cents, 5 minutes, 1 pot, 1 spoon. Andy Warhol put those red and white cans in a Los Angeles gallery in 1962 and turned them into modern art. But the cans themselves barely changed after that because the design already worked. The soup inside still tastes about the same as it did back then. A single can today costs close to $2, and the biggest practical difference besides the price is that most people reach for an electric opener instead of cranking one by hand. Number 76. A spool of thread. A nickel at the fabric counter or the 5 and dime. White, black, or a handful of basic colors. Every household had a sewing box somewhere, and inside that box a few spools rattled around next to a pincushion and a pair of scissors that were never sharp enough. Mending was not a craft project. It was how you made clothes last. A loose button, a split seam, a hem that gave out. You sat down and fixed it because the idea of throwing out a shirt over a missing button had not occurred to anyone yet. A spool of thread today costs $3 to $5, and most people under 40 have never threaded a needle. The sewing box has been replaced by a delivery app, and the nickel fix has been replaced by a trip to the store for something new. Number 75. A light bulb. Not everything that cost a nickel in the 1960s came from the candy counter or the grocery store. Some of it kept the lights on. A standard 60-watt incandescent bulb cost between 15 and 25 cents at the hardware store, and most households kept a few spares in a kitchen drawer or on a shelf in the basement. The bulb screwed into the socket, glowed orange-white, and heated up enough to burn your fingers if you touched it right after turning it off. When it burned out, which happened every several months, you unscrewed it, tossed it in the trash, and screwed in a new one. The whole replacement cost less than a cup of coffee. Today, a single LED bulb runs $3 to $5, lasts for years, uses a fraction of the electricity, and never gets hot. Progress, but the 20-cent light bulb was a kind of luxury in its own right, cheap enough to take completely for granted. Number 74. A tube of toothpaste. Colgate, Crest, or Pepsodent. In the 1960s, a full-size tube ran about a quarter, and a travel-size tube cost a dime or less. The tube was metal, not plastic, and you rolled it up carefully from the bottom with a flat key or just squeezed it in the middle, which started more household arguments than anyone will ever admit. Every bathroom had a tube sitting on the edge of the sink, dented and rolled and squeezed into whatever shape the last person left it in. The toothpaste tasted like mint or chalk or something in between, and every tube lasted weeks because you only used a small smear on the bristles. Today, a single tube of toothpaste runs $4 to $7 depending on whether it promises whitening, sensitivity, relief, charcoal infusion, or all three at once. The metal tube is long gone, and so is the price that made dental care feel like an afterthought at the checkout counter. Number 73. A pack of cigarettes. This one is not about nostalgia for the product itself, but the price is staggering to look back on. A pack of cigarettes in the 1960s cost about a quarter. Some brands ran 30 cents. Vending machines in restaurants, hotels, and bowling alleys dispensed them for loose change, and nobody checked your age. The packs were slim, the warnings had not arrived yet, and smoking was so common that ashtrays sat on every desk, every restaurant table, and every airplane armrest. Today, a pack of cigarettes costs anywhere from $8 to $15 depending on the state, and the taxes alone exceed what the entire pack cost in 1965. The vending machines are gone, the ashtrays are gone, and the quarter price tag belongs to a world that treated cigarettes like chewing gum. Number 72. A. Safety razor blade. A pack of double-edged razor blades cost about a dime for 5 in the 1960s. That was 2 cents per blade, and each blade lasted a week or more of daily shaving. Your father kept them in the medicine cabinet behind the mirror, and every kid knew not to touch them because those thin strips of steel were genuinely sharp. The razor itself was a solid chrome handle that weighed enough to feel serious in your hand, the kind of object built to last a lifetime. You replaced only the blade, never the handle, and one razor could serve a man for decades. Today, the disposable cartridge razor market charges $5 to $8 for a 4-pack of replacement heads, and the handles are designed to lock you into one brand. The 2-cent blade that fit any handle and lasted a week has been replaced by a subscription service. Number 71. A city bus fare. In most American cities during the 1960s, a bus ride cost a dime or 15 cents. You dropped your coins into the fare box, the driver nodded, and you found a seat. Transfers were free or cost a penny. You could cross an entire city for less than a quarter, and for kids and seniors the fare was often half that. The bus smelled like diesel and vinyl seats. The windows cranked open in the summer, and the route map was printed on a card posted above the driver's head. Public transit was cheap enough that almost anyone could use it without planning a budget around it. A single bus fare today runs $2 to $3 in most cities, and a monthly pass can cost over $100. The dime bus ride that connected every neighborhood in the city is a figure from a different economy. Number 70. A toy from the 5 and dime. Woolworths, Kresge's, Ben Franklin. The 5 and dime store was where a child with a quarter felt wealthy. The toy section was a wall of small wonders: balsa wood gliders, tin whistles, rubber balls, jacks, yo-yos, plastic army men sold in bags of 50 for a dime. Nothing cost much because nothing was supposed to last forever. The toys were small, they broke fast, and that was understood. A balsa glider flew beautifully for about 15 minutes before the wing snapped and you glued it back together with model cement and flew it again. Today, a single small toy at a big box store runs $5 to $15, and the 5 and dime itself is extinct. The stores that sold a bag of 50 army men for a dime are as gone as the army men themselves. Number 69. A tin of shoe polish. Kiwi brand, usually. Black or brown. A small round tin cost a dime or less, and it lasted for months because a little went a long way. Every household had a shoe shine kit somewhere, even if it was just a tin of polish, a rag, and an old toothbrush tucked into a paper bag under the bathroom sink. Shoes was a weekly ritual for men who worked in offices and a Sunday ritual for anyone who went to church. You rubbed the polish on, let it dry to a haze, and buffed it with a cloth until the leather reflected light. The smell of shoe polish was the smell of getting ready for something that mattered. Number 68. A bag of clothespins. Wooden spring-loaded clothespins cost a few cents for a bag of several dozen. They lived in a cloth bag that hung on the clothesline, weathered gray by sun and rain, and they were used every single laundry day. The clothesline ran across the backyard from a pole to the side of the house, and everything went on it. Sheets, shirts, towels, socks, underwear. The whole neighborhood could see your laundry, and nobody thought twice about it. The sun dried the clothes and the wind softened them, and the wooden pins held everything in place unless a strong gust knocked a pillowcase into the mud. A bag of clothespins today runs $3 to $5. The clothesline itself is rare now, banned by many homeowner associations, replaced by electric dryers that do the job in an hour but cost considerably more than free sunshine. Number 67. An ice cream cone. On a hot summer afternoon in the 1960s, a single scoop on a cone from the neighborhood shop or the truck that rolled down the street cost a nickel or a dime. You heard the truck before you saw it, that jingle cutting through the heat, and you ran inside for coins and ran back out before it reached the end of the block. Chocolate, strawberry. The scoop was generous, the cone was thin and crispy, and the ice cream melted faster than you could eat it, running down your hand and dripping off your elbow onto the sidewalk. Nobody cared. A dime bought you 5 minutes of pure summer happiness, and that was the whole deal. A single scoop at most ice cream shops today runs $4 to $6, and the truck that rolls through the neighborhood charges even more. The dime cone on a hot afternoon has become a luxury that costs more than a full diner lunch did back then. Number 66. A school composition notebook. The black and white marbled cover was unmistakable. Every student in America knew what it looked like, and every one of them filled at least a few over the course of a school year. A composition book cost about a dime in the 1960s, sometimes less during the back-to-school sales at the 5 and dime. The pages were lined, the binding was stitched, and if you pressed too hard with your pencil, the graphite smeared across the opposite page when you closed the cover. You wrote in cursive because that was what the teacher required, and your handwriting told the world exactly how much you cared. A composition notebook today costs $2 to $4, which is a significant jump, but the bigger shift is that most of the writing students do now happens on a screen instead of behind that marbled cover. Number 65. A packet of garden seeds. 5 cents for a small paper envelope with enough seeds to fill a row or two in the backyard garden. Tomatoes, beans, radishes, marigolds, zinnias. The packets hung on a wire rack at the hardware store or the garden center, each one printed with a full-color illustration of what the plant would look like if everything went right. You tore the top, shook the tiny seeds into your palm, and pressed them into the dirt with your thumb. Whether they grew depended on the weather, the soil, and how well you remembered to water them. The whole investment was a nickel and a bit of patience. A packet of seeds today costs $2 to $4, and the backyard vegetable garden has gone from everyday necessity to weekend hobby. The nickel envelope that fed a family a row of tomatoes is a bargain that belonged to a different relationship with the ground. Number 64. A roll of Scotch tape. A basic roll of clear tape cost about 15 cents in the 1960s, and it lived in the junk drawer of every kitchen in America, alongside a pair of scissors, a screwdriver, and a collection of rubber bands that nobody could explain. You used it for wrapping birthday presents, taping torn homework, hanging drawings on the refrigerator, and fixing the spine of a paperback book that had been read one too many times. The tape yellowed over time, and the edges curled, and the adhesive went dry on the roll if you left it too long. But for 15 cents, nobody expected permanence. You used it, it worked for a while, and when it failed, you bought another roll without a second thought. A roll of Scotch tape today costs $3 to $5, and the junk drawer is still there, and the tape is still in it. Some things do not change except for the number on the receipt. Number 63. A pair of cotton socks. White athletic socks, the kind with the ribbed top that came up to mid-calf, cost about $1.25 for a pair at most department stores in the 1960s. A 3-pack ran 50 cents or so. They were cotton, they absorbed everything, and they wore thin at the heel and the toe within a few months. When the holes appeared, you darned them with a needle and thread if you were thrifty, or you tossed them and bought a new pair for $0.25 if you were not. Either way, the cost was so small it barely registered. A pair of basic cotton socks today runs $3 to $5, and a multi-pack from a brand name can cost $15 or $20. Darning socks is a skill that disappeared along with the quarter price tag. Number 62. A bottle of ketchup. Heinz, usually, in a heavy glass bottle with a narrow neck that turned every meal into an exercise in patience. You held the bottle at an angle, tapped the bottom with the heel of your hand, tapped again, and waited. The ketchup came out in a sudden rush or not at all, and half the time it landed on the tablecloth instead of the plate. The bottle cost about 15 cents and lasted the family several weeks. Nobody complained about the wait because that was just how ketchup came out of a bottle. It was a universal experience. Every family dinner, Every diner booth, every backyard cookout involved someone holding that bottle at an angle and waiting. A bottle of Heinz today costs $3 to $5. The glass has been replaced by a squeezable plastic bottle designed to sit upside down, and the patience that ketchup once demanded at every American table has been quietly engineered away. Number 61. A Swanson TV dinner. The aluminum tray with the peel-back foil cover cost about 40 to 50 cents in the 1960s. Salisbury steak, mashed potatoes, peas, and a square of cobbler in a compartmentalized tray that looked like an airplane meal and tasted like convenience. You slid it into the oven for 25 minutes, pulled it out with a pot holder, and ate it on a folding tray table in front of the television set. The whole point was that nobody had to cook. The tray was hot, the meal was predictable, and the evening was free. A frozen dinner today costs $3 to $6, and the packaging has shifted from aluminum to microwavable plastic. The folding TV tray table is still around, but the 50-cent dinner that gave it a reason to exist has inflated beyond recognition. Number 60. A dozen donuts. Walk into any bakery or donut shop in the 1960s, and a dozen donuts cost about 50 to 70 cents. Some shops sold singles for a nickel each. The donuts were made that morning in the back room, and you could see the oil and the flour and the trays of glaze through the swinging door behind the counter. Glazed, chocolate, jelly-filled, powdered sugar, old-fashioned cake. The selection was not enormous, but every option was fresh, and the shop smelled like warm dough and hot sugar from half a block away. Saturday mornings, a father stopped in on the way home from an early errand and carried a white box tied with bakery string back to the kitchen table. That box cost less than $1, and it fed the entire family breakfast and probably left enough for an afternoon snack. The bakery itself was a neighborhood institution. The same woman behind the counter every morning, the same coffee urn on the side table, the same regulars leaning on the glass case and talking about the weather. The shop was not a franchise. It did not have a drive-through or an app for mobile orders. It was a room that smelled like donuts because that was all it did. A dozen donuts at most chain shops today runs $10 to $18. The donuts themselves are often made at a central facility and shipped frozen to the store. The white box and the bakery string are gone. The neighborhood shop has been squeezed out by national brands, and the 70-cent dozen that made Saturday morning feel like a celebration has become a purchase that requires actual deliberation. The donuts are still round. The experience around them is not. Number 59. A 5-pound bag of flour. About 20 to 25 cents for a bag of all-purpose flour in the 1960s. It sat in the pantry of every kitchen in America because baking was not a hobby. It was just part of running a household. Biscuits, pie crusts, gravy thickener, breading for fried chicken, birthday cakes from scratch. The flour bag was paper. It tore if you looked at it wrong, and a fine white dust settled on everything within a 2-foot radius every time you opened it. Families went through several bags a month because buying a loaf of bread was sometimes more expensive than baking one. A 5-pound bag of flour today costs $3 to $5. Baking from scratch has become a weekend project instead of a daily routine, and the flour bag in most pantries sits there a lot longer than it used to. Number 58. A bottle of nail polish. Revlon, Q-Tex, or one of a handful of other brands. A small bottle of nail polish cost about 15 to 20 cents at the drugstore counter. The colors were limited: red, pink, clear, and occasionally a shade of coral that every woman in the neighborhood seemed to own at the same time. You painted your nails at the kitchen table on a Saturday night, blew on them until they dried, and hoped the polish lasted through Monday without chipping. The bottle was glass, the brush was thin, and the smell of acetone filled the room for the rest of the evening. A bottle of nail polish today costs $5 to $12, and the color selection fills entire walls at the beauty supply store. The 20-cent bottle with 3 color choices has been replaced by an industry worth billions. Number 57. A box of popcorn at the movies. And if you thought the price of the movie ticket has changed, wait until you hear about the snack counter. A box of popcorn at the movie theater in the 1960s cost about a dime, 15 cents for a large. The popcorn was popped fresh in a glass-sided machine behind the counter, scooped into a red and white striped box, and drizzled with melted butter from a chrome pump. The salt stuck to your fingers and the butter soaked through the bottom of the box, and you balanced it on your knee in the dark and ate with one hand while the movie played. A box of movie theater popcorn today costs $8 to $12. The popcorn itself has not changed much, but the price has multiplied so many times over that the snack counter is now where the theater makes most of its money. Number 56. A hot dog from a sidewalk cart. In most American cities in the 1960s, a hot dog from a street vendor cost a dime or 15 cents. You got a steamed frankfurter in a soft white bun, mustard, maybe sauerkraut or relish, wrapped in a piece of wax paper. You ate it standing up on the sidewalk in 2 minutes or less and kept walking. The hot dog was not gourmet. It did not come with artisan toppings or a brioche bun. It was a hot dog, and it cost a dime, and it solved the problem of being hungry when you were somewhere between home and wherever you were going. A street vendor hot dog in most cities today costs $4 to $7, and in some places it pushes past $10. The sidewalk is the same. The hot dog is roughly the same. The dime is not. Number 55. A full-size chocolate bar. Hershey's, Nestle Crunch, Butterfinger, Baby Ruth. A standard full-size bar cost a nickel through most of the early 1960s and crept toward a dime by the end of the decade. The bars were thick, the wrappers were printed in bold colors, and the chocolate tasted the way chocolate is supposed to taste when you are 8 years old, and it is the best thing that has happened all day. You peeled back the foil, broke off a piece or bit straight in, and the whole bar was gone in about 90 seconds. A full-size chocolate bar today costs $1.50 to $2, and the bar itself has quietly gotten smaller over the decades while the price has grown. The nickel Hershey bar that could improve an entire afternoon is now a $2 purchase that fits in one hand. Number 54. A bottle of root beer. A cold glass bottle of root beer from a machine or a soda fountain cost about a nickel in the early 1960s. At the soda fountain inside the drugstore, you could sit on a red vinyl stool, order a root beer float for a dime or 15 cents, and watch the pharmacist measure out prescriptions while you drank it. The root beer had a sharper bite than most sodas, a hint of wintergreen and vanilla, and something that tasted vaguely medicinal in the best possible way. The glass bottle sweated in your hand on a hot day, and the last sip was always the warmest and the flattest. A bottle of root beer today costs $2 or more, and the drugstore soda fountain where you drank it has been replaced by a drive-through pharmacy window. Number 53. A box of Jell-O. About a dime for a small box of flavored gelatin that made enough to fill a glass bowl and serve 6 people. Strawberry, lime, cherry, orange, lemon. You boiled water, stirred in the powder, added cold water, and slid the bowl into the refrigerator. By dinner, it had set into a shimmering dome that wobbled when you carried it to the table. Jell-O was at every potluck, every church supper, every holiday meal. Some people added fruit cocktail. Some added miniature marshmallows. Some molded it into elaborate shapes using copper molds that hung on the kitchen wall the rest of the year. A box of Jell-O today costs about $1 or more, and the potluck Jell-O mold has mostly disappeared from the American table, replaced by desserts that require more effort and cost 10 times as much. Number 52. A deck of playing cards. Bicycle brand, usually with the classic red or blue rider design on the back. A deck cost about a quarter in the 1960s, and every household had at least one tucked into a drawer or sitting on a shelf in the den. Cards were not a special occasion. They were what you did on a rainy afternoon, a Sunday evening, a long card, gin rummy, solitaire, go fish, war. poker with pennies on the kitchen table after the kids went to bed. The edges wore soft from shuffling, and when a card got bent or lost, you bought another deck for a quarter and started over. A standard deck of bicycle playing cards today costs $4 to $6. The games are the same, but the quarter deck that filled an evening without electricity or a screen is competing against entertainment that costs a lot more and does a lot less for conversation. Number 51. A roll of toilet paper. A single roll cost about a nickel in the 1960s, and most brands came in exactly one variety, white. There were no options for softness level, ply count, or quilted texture. The roll went on the holder in the bathroom, and the only household debate it ever generated was whether the paper should hang over the top or unroll from the back. Families bought it by the pack when it went on sale at the grocery store and stacked it in the hall closet without a second thought, because at a nickel a roll there was no reason to think about it. A single roll of toilet paper today costs 50 cents to over $1, and premium brands push well past that. The product that nobody wanted to talk about in 1965 now occupies an entire aisle and comes in enough varieties to require a decision that would have baffled anyone who just wanted a nickel roll of white. Number 50. A visit to the doctor. Up to this point, most of what we have covered are things you could hold in your hand or eat in a sitting. But some of the biggest price jumps happened in places you never wanted to go in the first place. A basic office visit to the family doctor in the 1960s cost about $3 to $5. The doctor knew your name, knew your family, and often made house calls if you were too sick to come in. You sat in a small waiting room with wood-paneled walls, read a magazine that was only a month old, and the visit itself lasted long enough for the doctor to actually listen. There was no copay, no referral process, and no bill that arrived 6 weeks later from a company you had never heard of. A routine doctor visit today costs anywhere from $100 to $300 before insurance, and the waiting room has been replaced by a system so complicated that most people need help just understanding the bill. Number 49. A dental cleaning. A routine cleaning and checkup at the dentist in the 1960s cost about $5. The dentist office smelled like clove oil and rubbing alcohol, the chair cranked up and down with a foot pump, and the drill sounded like a small engine that had no business being inside your mouth. But the cleaning itself was straightforward. Scrape, polish, rinse, spit into the porcelain bowl, and out the door. The receptionist handed you a new toothbrush on the way out, no charge, and you were done. In and out in under an hour, and the whole thing cost about the same as lunch at the diner across the street. A dental cleaning today runs $75 to $200 without insurance, and the toothbrush at the front desk has been replaced by a discount code for an electric model that costs $40 on its own. Number 48. A prescription at the pharmacy. Most common prescriptions in the 1960s cost between 50 cents and $2. Penicillin, cough syrup, basic painkillers. The pharmacist stood behind a raised counter, counted out the pills by hand, typed the label on a small manual typewriter, and put them in an amber glass bottle. The whole transaction took 5 minutes and cost less than lunch. You knew the pharmacist by name, and he knew what other medications you were taking because the records were on index cards in a file box behind the counter. A single prescription today can cost anywhere from $10 to several hundred, even with insurance covering a portion, and some medications cost more than a month's rent did back then. The amber bottle is plastic now, the label is printed by a computer, and the pharmacist behind the counter is processing prescriptions by the hundreds instead of filling them by hand for people whose names he knew. Number 47. A man's haircut at the barber shop. 75 cents to $1 in most towns. You walked in without an appointment, sat in a row of wooden chairs along the wall, and waited your turn. The shop had a spinning barber pole outside, a jar of blue barbicide on the counter, and a stack of newspapers and sporting magazines on a side table that had not changed in 3 months. When your turn came, you climbed into a heavy chrome and leather chair that pumped up with a foot pedal and the barber draped a white cloth over your shoulders and asked one question. Same as last time? He used hand clippers and scissors, worked without hurrying, and finished with a hot lather and a straight razor along the back of your neck. The whole cut took about 15 minutes. The smell of talcum powder and aftershave hung in the air, and the floor was covered in hair clippings that got swept into a pile at the end of each customer. A barbershop haircut was not a luxury. It was a routine. You went every 3 or 4 weeks, paid your dollar, tipped a quarter, and left looking exactly the way you were supposed to look for church, for work, for wherever you needed to be presentable. It was also a social institution. Men talked about baseball scores and local politics and whose kid had just shipped off to basic training. The barbershop was the one place a man could sit still for 15 minutes and nobody thought he was wasting time. A men's haircut today runs $20 to $40 at most barbershops, more in cities, and a tip of $5 to $10 on top of that. Some shops take appointments through an app. The chair adjusts electrically, and the barber pole outside is more decorative than functional. The dollar haircut that included a straight razor finish and 15 minutes of conversation with men you had known for 20 years is not something you can buy at any price now. Number 46. A pair of nylon stockings. About 50 cents to $1 for a good pair in the 1960s. Every woman owned several pairs because stockings were not optional. They were expected at the office, at church, at any event that required looking put together. The nylons came in a flat cardboard sleeve, slid on carefully to avoid snagging, and ran the moment they caught on a rough fingernail or a desk corner. When they ran, you either painted the snag with clear nail polish to stop it from spreading, or you threw them away and opened a new pair. A pair of quality pantyhose today costs $5 to $15, and while the expectation to wear them has relaxed considerably, the product itself has not gotten any more durable. The 50-cent pair that ran on Monday and got replaced on Tuesday was frustrating, but at least the replacement cost less than a cup of coffee. Number 45. A box of laundry detergent. A standard-size box of Tide or Fab or All cost about 25 to 30 cents in the 1960s. The box was heavy cardboard printed in bright colors, and you scooped the powder out with a metal measuring cup or just dumped in what looked like the right amount. The detergent smelled like artificial flowers and left a fine dust on the shelf where the box sat. Laundry day was usually Monday. The washing machine filled with hot water, you added the soap, loaded the clothes, and everything came out clean enough to hang on the line. A box of laundry detergent today costs $10 to $20, and the options include pods, liquid, powder, scent-boosting beads, and formulas for cold water, sensitive skin, or high-efficiency machines. The 25-cent box of powder that handled everything in one scoop has been replaced by a product aisle that requires a chemistry degree to navigate. Number 44. A quart of milk. About 20 cents delivered to your front door. In many neighborhoods in the 1960s, the milkman still came. He drove a white truck, carried the glass bottles in a wire rack, and left them in a metal box on your porch before dawn. The bottles had paper caps with the dairy's name printed on them, and the cream floated at the top because the milk was not yet homogenized in the way it would be later. You rinsed the empty bottles and set them back in the box, and the next delivery day the milkman picked them up and left full ones. A quart of milk at the grocery store today costs $1.50 or more. The glass bottle is gone, and the milkman has disappeared from every residential street in America. Home delivery came back eventually through apps and subscription services, but the 20-cent quart in a glass bottle on the porch has not. Number 43. A pound of ground beef. About 30 to 40 cents a pound in the 1960s. The butcher at the grocery store stood behind a white counter, took your order, weighed the meat on a hanging scale, wrapped it in white paper, and wrote the price on top with a grease pencil. You could ask for a specific amount, and he trimmed or added until the scale was right. Ground beef went into meatloaf, hamburgers, spaghetti sauce, chili, and a dozen other dinners that fed a family for $1 or less per meal. The meat was not labeled organic or grass-fed or hormone-free because those distinctions did not exist yet in the consumer market. A pound of ground beef today costs $5 to $8. The butcher counter has largely been replaced by pre-packaged trays in a refrigerated case, and the 30-cent pound that anchored the American dinner table is a price that sounds fictional. Number 42. A dozen eggs. About 40 to 50 cents for a dozen in the 1960s. The eggs came in a pressed paper carton, sometimes with the farm name printed on the lid, and they sat in the refrigerator door until you needed them. Scrambled, fried, boiled, or folded into a cake batter. Eggs appeared at breakfast and showed up again at dinner inside something else. Nobody called them free-range or cage-free because most people did not think about where eggs came from beyond the word farm. A dozen eggs today costs $3 to $6, and in recent years the price has spiked even higher during supply disruptions. The 50-cent carton that fed a family breakfast for a week without a thought is now a purchase that people notice at the checkout, and that shift is something almost nobody in the 1960s would have predicted. Number 41. A 5-pound bag of sugar. About 25 cents for a bag of white granulated sugar that sat in the pantry next to the flour and the baking soda. Sugar went into everything. Morning coffee, iced tea, Kool-Aid pitchers, cake batter, cookie dough, pie filling, homemade jam. You scooped it out with a measuring cup or just poured it straight into the bowl, and a single bag could last a household several weeks of daily baking and cooking. The bag was paper. It tore easily, and spilled sugar on the counter was one of those background facts of kitchen life that nobody even bothered to comment on. A 5-pound bag of sugar today costs $3 to $5. The bag is the same, the sugar is the same, and the only thing that has changed is the price, and the fact that most people use a fraction of what their grandmothers did. Number 40. A can of tuna fish. About 15 cents for a can of chicken of the sea or bumblebee in the 1960s. You opened it with a can opener, drained the liquid into the sink, and mixed it with mayonnaise and a little celery for sandwiches, or dumped it into a casserole with noodles and cream of mushroom soup. Tuna was the emergency meal, the lazy meal, the we have nothing else in the house meal. A can sat in every pantry as a kind of insurance policy against an empty refrigerator. A can of tuna today costs $2 to $4, and some brands market it as a premium protein source. The 15-cent can that used to be the last resort in a bare kitchen has somehow become a product with its own marketing budget, a detailed nutrition label that people actually read, and packaging that advertises the ocean of origin. A can of emergency dinner now costs what a small bag of groceries did in 1965. Number 39. A roll of aluminum foil. Reynolds wrap, usually. About 20 cents for a roll in the 1960s. The box had a serrated metal edge that cut the foil when you pulled it across, and it never worked as well as the box promised. You tore the foil unevenly, crumpled the ruined piece, and tried again. Aluminum foil covered leftovers, wrapped baked potatoes, lined baking pans, and occasionally served as a makeshift antenna extension for the television set when the reception went fuzzy. Some families washed used sheets of foil, dried them on the counter, folded them neatly, and stored them in a drawer for next time, because even at 20 cents per roll, wasting anything felt fundamentally wrong. That habit said more about the generation than the foil did. A roll of Reynolds wrap today costs $5 to $8, and the serrated edge on the box still does not cut cleanly. At least that part is consistent. Number 38. A box of Band-Aids. Johnson & Johnson sold a small tin of adhesive bandages for about a dime in the 1960s. The tin had a flip lid, and inside were a stack of flesh-colored strips and individual paper wrappers. You peeled the wrapper, pulled off the backing tabs, and pressed the bandage over the scrape or cut on your knee, your finger, your elbow, wherever the day's adventure had left a mark. The bandages came in one color and one shape, and they peeled off in the bathtub after about 10 minutes of soaking. A box of Band-Aids today costs $4 to $7, and the selection includes waterproof, fabric, blister pads, butterfly closures, and character prints for children. The dime tin that handled every scraped knee on the block is now a full product line with its own aisle section. Number 37. A bag of charcoal. A 10-pound bag of Kingsford briquettes cost about 30 to 40 cents in the 1960s. Summer meant grilling, and grilling meant charcoal. You piled the briquettes into a pyramid in the bottom of the grill, doused them with lighter fluid, struck a match, and stepped back. The flame whooshed up, the fluid burned off, and 20 minutes later you had a bed of glowing gray-white coals that cooked hamburgers, hot dogs, chicken, and corn on the cob for the entire neighborhood if enough people showed. The grill was usually a simple round kettle or a flat rectangular box on legs, and the only temperature control was moving the food closer to or farther from the coals. A bag of charcoal today costs $8 to $15, and the charcoal grill itself is competing with gas models and electric pellet smokers that cost hundreds. The 40-cent bag that powered every backyard cookout of the decade has become one of many options in a market that turned grilling into a lifestyle. Number 36. A birthday cake from the bakery. $2 to $3 for a full-size decorated cake with frosting, piping, and your name written across the top in colored icing. The bakery made it that morning. You picked it up in a flat white box, carried it home carefully on the car seat, and set it on the kitchen table next to a stack of paper plates and a box of candles. The cake tasted like butter and sugar and whatever flavor the bakery did best, and it fed 12 people easily. Nobody debated between fondant and buttercream or asked about allergy. It was a cake. It cost $2. It had your name on it. A custom birthday cake from a bakery today costs $30 to $70, and elaborate designs with multiple tiers can push well into the hundreds. The $2 cake with your name piped in icing was the centerpiece of every childhood birthday party, and it cost less than a gallon of gasoline does now. Number 35. A roll of camera film. A roll of Kodak or Fuji film cost about 30 to 50 cents in the 1960s. You got 12, 24, or 36 exposures per roll. And every single one counted because once you clicked the shutter, that frame was used. You could not delete it, could not review it, could not take 50 shots and pick the best one later. You composed the picture in your mind, held the camera steady, and pressed the button once. Then you wound the film forward with a small lever and hoped the shot came out. When the roll was finished, you dropped it off at the drugstore or mailed it to a processing lab and waited days for the prints to come back. Now, a roll of film today, for the few who still use it, costs $8 to $15, and developing adds another 10 to 20 on top of that. The 50-cent roll that held your vacation, your birthday, and your Christmas morning in 24 careful frames belongs to a world where every photograph was a small decision, not a reflex. Number 34. A gallon of house paint, about $3 to $4 for a gallon of interior paint in the 1960s. You drove to the hardware store, picked a color from a small card on the counter, and the clerk mixed it by hand or pulled a pre-mixed can off the shelf. The paint smelled strong enough to open every window in the house, and it took 2 coats to cover anything darker than the color you were putting on. Painting a room was a weekend project that cost less than $10 for the paint and another $1 for the brushes and the roller. Newspaper went on the floor, masking tape went around the trim, and by Sunday afternoon the room was a different color and the whole house smelled like latex for a week. A gallon of decent interior paint today costs $30 to $60, and premium brands push past that. The $4 gallon that transformed a room over a weekend has been replaced by a product that costs more per gallon than the monthly electric bill did in 1965. Number 33. A book of matches. Free most of the time. Restaurants, hotels, bars, gas stations, and drugstores all gave away books of matches with their name and address printed on the cover. They sat in a bowl on the counter or next to the register, and you took 1 or 3 and stuck them in your pocket without asking. The matchbooks had 20 matches inside, and you tore one off, struck it against the strip, and lit a candle, a cigarette, a gas stove burner, or a backyard grill. Matchbooks were so common and so cheap that people collected them as souvenirs from places they had visited. A book of matches today, when you can find one, costs about $1 at a convenience store. The giveaway matchbook with the restaurant's name on the cover has been replaced by a lighter, and the bowl on the counter is a memory from a time when fire was something you carried in your pocket for free. Number 32. A pair of sunglasses from the drugstore. About 50 cents to $1 for a basic pair with dark lenses and plastic frames. They hung on a spinning rack near the register at the drugstore or the 5 and dime, and you tried on 3 or 4 pairs. Checked the mirror clipped to the side of the rack and picked the ones that looked right. Nobody asked about UV protection or polarization or lens coatings. The lenses were dark. They kept the sun out of your eyes, and that was the entire purpose. If they broke, which they often did because the plastic was thin and the hinges were weak, you bought another pair for 50 cents. A pair of basic drugstore sunglasses today costs $10 to $20, and name brand pairs run $50 to $300. The 50-cent pair on the spinning rack at the drugstore is still the right idea. The price just moved. Number 31. School lunch. In most public schools in the 1960s, a hot lunch cost about 25 to 35 cents. The tray was divided into compartments, and the cafeteria ladies served each portion with a large spoon, a scoop of mashed potatoes, a ladle of gravy, a piece of meat, a pile of green beans, a roll, and a carton of milk. The food was not exciting, but it was hot, it was filling, and it was the same for every kid in the line. You carried the tray to a long table, sat on a bench, and ate in about 12 minutes before recess. A school lunch today runs $2 to $4, and some districts charge more. The federal government subsidizes the program, but the 30-cent hot lunch that put the same meal in front of every child in the building is a price from an era that treated feeding kids at school as something barely worth charging for. Number 30. A hammer from the hardware store. A basic claw hammer cost about $1 to $1.50 in the 1960s. The handle was real hickory wood, the head was forged steel, and it was the kind of tool that a man bought once and kept for 30 years. The hardware store itself was a small building on Main Street run by a man who knew where every bolt, screw, nail, and hinge was without looking. You told him what you needed, he walked to the right bin, and he charged you fairly. A basic hammer today costs $10 to $25, and the hardware store on Main Street has been replaced by a warehouse the size of an airplane hangar where you wander the aisles looking for aisle 14 and hope someone can help you find a 16-penny nail. Number 29. A bottle of shampoo. Prel, Breck, or Head & Shoulders. A full-size bottle cost about 35 to 50 cents in the 1960s. The bottle sat on the edge of the bathtub or on a wire shelf in the shower stall, and one bottle served the entire family. Nobody had their own shampoo. You squeezed a palmful, lathered, rinsed, and the job was done. There was no conditioner step, no leave-in treatment, and no sulfate-free formula. Shampoo was shampoo, and it cost less than a candy bar costs today. A bottle of shampoo now runs $5 to $12, and the hair care aisle at the store is longer than the entire personal care section was at most drugstores in the 1960s. The 50-cent bottle that the whole family shared without complaint has been replaced by a personal care routine with its own shelf in the shower. Number 28. A bag of marbles. A small mesh bag of glass marbles cost about a dime at the 5 and dime in the 1960s. Solid colors, cat's eyes, shooters, steelies. You carried them in your pocket, and the sound they made clicking against each other was the sound of recess and sidewalks and summer afternoons. The games had names: Ringer, Knuckle Down, Chase. You drew a circle in the dirt with a stick, placed your marbles inside, and flicked your shooter with your thumb, trying to knock the other player's marbles out of the ring. Winning meant keeping the marbles you knocked out. Losing meant walking home with a lighter pocket. A bag of glass marbles today costs $3 to $5, and almost no children play with them. The dime bag that powered an entire summer of competition has been replaced by screens, and the dirt circles in the schoolyard have been paved over. Number 27. A kitchen sponge. A basic cellulose sponge cost about a nickel in the 1960s. Yellow, rectangular, the same one in every kitchen sink in America. You used it until it fell apart, which took weeks of daily scrubbing, and then you threw it away and replaced it with a new one for another nickel. The sponge smelled like wet dishwater by the end of the first week, and everybody knew it. And nobody did anything about it because a new one cost 5 cents and the old one still worked. A kitchen sponge today costs $1 to $3, and the varieties include antimicrobial, scrub pad-backed, natural cellulose, silicone, and shapes designed to fit specific kinds of cookware. The nickel yellow rectangle that scrubbed every pot in the house did not need a product line. It just needed soap and elbow grease. Number 26. A box of envelopes. A box of 25 white envelopes cost about a dime to 15 cents in the 1960s. They sat in the desk drawer next to the stamps and the letter opener, ready to go whenever you needed to mail something. And in the 1960s, you needed to mail something constantly. Bills, checks, letters, invitations, thank you notes, complaints to the electric company. Communication was paper-based, and the envelope was the vehicle. You folded the letter, slid it in, licked the flap, pressed it shut, wrote the address on the front, stuck on a stamp, and walked it to the mailbox on the corner. A box of envelopes today costs $4 to $8, and most people go through about 3 envelopes a month instead of 3 a week. The dime box that emptied every couple of weeks has been replaced by a box that sits in the same drawer for a year, because almost everything that used to travel in an envelope now travels through a screen. Number 25. A transistor radio. You could buy a small pocket-sized transistor radio for about $5 to $10 in the 1960s, and it changed everything about how people listened to music and news. Before the transistor, a radio was a piece of furniture. After it, a radio fit in your shirt pocket. You carried it to the beach, to the ballpark, to the backyard while you mowed the lawn. The sound was thin and tinny. The dial was small, and you adjusted the tuning by rolling a tiny wheel with your thumb until the station came in clear. The single earpiece was a wire that plugged into the side, and the whole thing ran on a 9-volt battery that lasted for weeks. A comparable portable speaker or radio today costs $20 to $100, but the real shift is that the radio itself has been absorbed into the phone. The $5 device that brought rock and roll to every sidewalk and swimming pool in America has become a function inside something else. Number 24. A 45 RPM record. A single cost about 70 cents to $1 at the record shop. And for that price, you got your favorite song on one side and a B-side that was either a hidden gem or a track the label needed to put somewhere. The record was a small black disc with a big hole in the center, and you needed a plastic adapter to play it on most turntables. You carried your 45s in a small carrying case, stacked them on the spindle of a portable player, and listened to the same song 15 times in a row because the alternative was waiting for the radio station to play it. A vinyl single today, for collectors who still buy them, costs $4 to $8, and the record shop on Main Street has been replaced by a streaming service that charges $10 a month for every song ever recorded. The 70-cent disc that lets you own a song is a novelty now. Number 23. A night at the drive-in. $1 per car. That was the price at most drive-in theaters in the 1960s, and it covered everyone inside the vehicle. You pulled in, found a spot, hooked the speaker onto the window, and settled in for a double feature under the stars. The screen was enormous, the sound was marginal, and the concession stand sold hot dogs and popcorn and sodas at prices that made the indoor theater look expensive. Families loaded the station wagon with pillows and blankets. Kids fell asleep in the back seat before the second feature started, and nobody cared because the whole evening cost less than $2. A night at a drive-in today, for the few that still exist, costs $10 to $15 per person, and the speaker on the window has been replaced by an FM radio frequency. The dollar per car family night under the stars is one of the purest examples of affordable entertainment that simply does not exist anymore. Number 22. An amusement park ride. At most local amusement parks and traveling carnivals in the 1960s, a single ride cost a dime or a quarter. You bought a strip of tickets at the booth, tore off the right number for each ride, and the rest went in your pocket for the Ferris wheel or the bumper cars later. The rides were simple: a tilt-a-whirl, a carousel, a scrambler that spun until your vision blurred, a fun house with warped mirrors, and an air vent that blew up skirts at the exit. The smells were cotton candy, popcorn, diesel from the generators, and hot metal from the ride gears. A single ride at most parks today costs $4 to $8 if you are paying per ride, and an all-day wristband runs $30 to $60 or more. The quarter ride that spun you dizzy and left you laughing on the midway has become a budgeted family expense. Number 21. A taxi ride across town. In most American cities in the 1960s, a taxi ride across town cost about $1 to $2. The meter started at 15 or 20 cents and ticked up in small increments. The cab was usually a Checker or a Ford, painted yellow or some local color, and the driver knew the streets without a screen telling him where to turn. You flagged him down at the curb, told him where you were going, and watched the meter climb slowly while the city rolled past the window. Tipping was a quarter or 50 cents, and nobody calculated a percentage on their phone. A taxi or ride share across a mid-sized city today runs $15 to $40, and the driver follows a GPS route on a phone mounted to the dashboard. The dollar cab ride with the clicking meter and the driver who knew every shortcut is a memory from a city that moved at a different pace and a different price. Number 20. A Thanksgiving turkey. A whole frozen turkey in the 1960s cost about 30 to 40 cents per pound. A 12-pound bird ran roughly $4 to $5, enough to feed the family, the in-laws, the neighbor who showed up unannounced, and still leave leftovers for a week of sandwiches. The turkey sat in the refrigerator thawing for 3 days, went into the oven at dawn, and came out golden and glistening sometime in the mid-afternoon. The smell filled every room in the house. Mashed potatoes, gravy, cranberry sauce from a can, green bean casserole, dinner rolls, and a pie. The entire Thanksgiving spread, turkey included, cost less than $10 to put on the table. A comparable turkey today costs $2 to $3 per pound, and the full Thanksgiving meal for a family of 8 runs $50 to $80 or more. The $4 bird at the center of the table is a price that belongs to a holiday that felt different when feeding everyone cost less than a single restaurant dinner does now. Number 19. A pair of canvas sneakers. Converse All-Stars, Keds, or PF Flyers. A pair of canvas sneakers in the 1960s cost about $3 to $5, and for a lot of kids, one pair had to last the entire school year. They were flat-soled, thin, offered zero arch support, and turned dark gray within a week of playground use. You laced them up tight, ran on asphalt and gravel and mud, and when the canvas tore or the sole separated from the rubber, your mother decided whether they could survive one more month or if it was time for a new pair. Converse Chuck Taylors were the basketball shoe. Every gym class, every pickup game in the park, every kid shooting hoops on a concrete driveway wore the same shoe, and nobody called it a fashion statement. It was just the shoe that existed. You wore them until the rubber toe cap peeled off and the canvas was more wool than fabric, and even then, they became the shoes you wore to mow the lawn. The broke and you replaced them for a nickel. The insoles flattened out, and you kept wearing them because the alternative was going barefoot. A pair of sneakers was not something you collected or displayed or rotated through your week. It was a tool that went on your feet in the morning and came off at night, and at $4, it was the cheapest tool in the house. A pair of Converse Chuck Taylors today costs $60 to $80, and they are marketed as a fashion icon. Limited editions sell for over $100. The $4 shoe that every kid in America wore to do everything, from gym class to fishing to riding a bicycle, is now a collector's item that some people buy and never wear. The shoe did not change. The price did. And the way people think about a pair of canvas sneakers has shifted from utility to identity, which might be the biggest price increase of all. Number 18. A bicycle tire. About $1 to $1.50 for a replacement tire at the hardware store or the bicycle shop in the 1960s. Flat tires were a fact of life for any kid who rode a bike, and fixing them was part of owning one. You pried the tire off the rim with a flat screwdriver, pulled out the inner tube, patched the hole with a small rubber patch and a tube of cement from a kit that cost about $0.25, and put the whole thing back together. If the tire itself was worn through, a new one cost $1, and the man at the bike shop could mount it in 5 minutes. A replacement bicycle tire today cost $15 to $30, and the patch kit is still around, but most people just take the bike to a shop and pay $20 for someone else to do what every 10-year-old used to do with a screwdriver and a bucket of water. Number 17. A set of dishes from the supermarket. This one was not quite a purchase. It was more like a loyalty program before anyone used that word. Grocery stores in the 1960s ran promotions where you collected stamps or tokens with every visit, and after enough trips you earned a complete set of dinnerware, a piece at a time. Dinner plate this week, a saucer next week, a cup the week after that. The dishes were not fine china. They were sturdy, brightly colored stoneware, and they ended up in kitchens across the country because the grocery store was giving them away with every purchase. The dishes cost nothing beyond the groceries you were buying anyway, and families used them for years. A comparable set of everyday dinnerware today costs $20 to $60, and the grocery store promotion that gave away dishes one piece at a time has all but disappeared. Those supermarket plates are now turning up in antique shops, priced at several dollars each for something that was free. Number 16. A lawn mowing from the neighbor kid. 50 cents to $1. That was the going rate for a teenager with a push mower to cut your lawn in the 1960s. He showed up Saturday morning, mowed the front and the back, trimmed the edges if he was ambitious, and knocked on the door when he was done. You handed him $1 and maybe a glass of lemonade, and the whole arrangement ran on a handshake, no invoice, no app, no online booking. The kid earned spending money. You got a mowed lawn, and nobody thought of it as a business transaction. A professional lawn service today costs $40 to $80 per visit, and the neighbor kid with the push mower has been replaced by a crew with commercial equipment and a schedule booked out 2 weeks in advance. The dollar lawn mowing was not just cheap, it was part of how a neighborhood worked. Number 15. A car wash. $1 or less at most gas stations in the 1960s. You pulled up to the bay, a man with a hose and a sponge went to work, and 10 minutes later your car was clean. Some stations included a basic wash with a fill-up, which meant you could drive away with a full tank and a clean car for less than $5 total. On weekends, kids washed cars in church parking lots or school lots as a fundraiser, charging 50 cents per car, and the line stretched down the block because nobody could argue with the price. An automatic car wash today costs $10 to $20, and a hand wash at a detail shop runs $30 to $50. The dollar car wash that came with a full tank of gas belonged to an era when service was included in the price of just about everything. Number 14. A box of Christmas ornaments. A box of glass ornaments cost about 50 cents to $1 at the 5 and dime or the hardware store in the 1960s. They came nestled in thin cardboard dividers inside a flat box, and each one was a small glass ball, hand-painted in red or gold or silver or green. You handled them carefully because they shattered if you dropped them, and every family had the story of the ornament that slipped off the tree and exploded on the hardwood floor on Christmas Eve. The ornaments were not collectible or artisan or hand-blown by a named craftsman. They were simple glass balls that caught the light from the tree and made the living room look like Christmas. A box of glass ornaments today costs $10 to $25, and individual designer ornaments can cost $15 each. The 50-cent box of glass balls that dressed the family tree every December is a price from a time when Christmas decorations were modest and nobody kept track of which ornament came from which year. Number 13. An oil change for the car. About $2 to $3 at most service stations in the 1960s. The mechanic drove the car over a pit or lifted it on a hydraulic jack, drained the old oil into a pan, replaced the filter, poured in fresh oil, and handed you the keys. The whole job took 15 minutes and cost less than a meal. A lot of men did it themselves in the driveway on a Saturday morning, sliding under the car on a piece of cardboard, because the oil and filter together cost about $1 and the work was simple enough that anyone with a wrench could handle it. An oil change at a quick lube shop today costs $30 to $75, and doing it yourself still requires the oil and filter, which run $15 to $25 on their own. The $2 oil change that kept the family car running for another 3,000 miles is a number that makes modern car owners flinch. Number 12. A college textbook. Most college textbooks in the 1960s cost between $2 and $5. A thick hardcover for a science or engineering course might push toward $8. You bought them at the campus bookstore at the start of the semester, wrote your name inside the front cover, and used them for 4 months of reading and highlighting and cramming. At the end of the term, you sold them back to the bookstore for half what you paid, and the cycle continued. A college textbook today costs $50 to $300, and some required texts push past that. The used market, the rental market, and the digital edition market all exist because the prices have risen so far that students are forced to find alternatives. The $5 textbook that a student bought, used, and resold for $2.50 is a price from an era when higher education did not require a financial strategy. Number 11. A visit to the emergency room. In the 1960s, an emergency room visit cost about $5 to $15. You walked in, or someone carried you in, and a doctor saw you. A broken arm, a deep cut, a high fever in the middle of the night. The bill came later, and it was small enough that most families could pay it outright without insurance getting involved. The hospital was a community institution, and the emergency room was where you went when something went wrong, not a place that required financial planning before you walked through the door. An emergency room visit today costs $500 to several $1,000s before any treatment is added, and a single night's stay in the hospital can run into the tens of thousands. The $10 ER visit, where a doctor set your broken wrist and sent you home with instructions and a small bill, is a memory from a healthcare system that operated on a completely different scale. Number 10. A long-distance phone call. In the 1960s, a long-distance call cost about $1 for the first 3 minutes during daytime hours, and less at night and on weekends. That dollar bought you 3 minutes of talking to a relative across the country, and the operator often came on the line to tell you when your time was almost up. Long distance was an event. You planned what you were going to say before you dialed. You talked fast, and you said goodbye before the meter ran into the next billing increment. Families saved long-distance calls for birthdays, holidays, and emergencies. Everyday conversation happened locally or by letter. Today, a phone call to anywhere in the country costs nothing on most plans, and a video call to the other side of the world is free on half a dozen apps. The $1 3-minute call that families rationed and rehearsed has been replaced by unlimited talk time that nobody thinks about, which is convenient but has quietly removed the weight that a long-distance phone call used to carry. Number 9. A motel room for the night. $6 to $12 for a clean room along the highway in the 1960s. The motel had a neon sign out front, a gravel parking lot, and a row of identical doors. You checked in at the front desk, the clerk handed you a metal key on a plastic tag, and you parked right in front of your door. The room had a bed, a television with 3 channels, a small bathroom with paper-wrapped soap, and a wall-mounted air conditioner that rattled loud enough to drown out the highway. It was clean, it was simple, and it cost about the same as dinner for two. Road trips across America were built on these rooms. You drove until you were tired, pulled off at the next motel with a vacancy sign lit up, and paid your $8 without a reservation. A basic motel room along the highway today costs $60 to $150, and the neon sign has been replaced by an online booking platform. The $8 room that made cross-country road trips possible on any budget has become a memory. Number 8. A train ticket. A one-way coach ticket on a major rail line in the 1960s cost roughly $10 to $20 for a several hundred-mile trip. The train station was a grand building downtown with high ceilings and wooden benches and a departures board that clattered when the letters flipped. You bought your ticket at a window, carried your suitcase to the platform, and boarded a car with wide seats and a view that stretched from one horizon to the other. The dining car served full meals, the porter helped with luggage, and the rhythm of the wheels on the track was the closest thing to meditation that most Americans had experienced. A comparable train ticket today costs $50 to $200, depending on the route and how far in advance you book. The station is still there in some cities, but the grandeur has faded, and the $20 ticket that carried you halfway across the country in a wide seat with a dining car attached is a price from a rail system that has not existed for decades. Number 7. A television repair. When the television stopped working in the 1960s, you did not throw it away. You called the repairman. He drove to your house in a panel van full of vacuum tubes and testing equipment, carried a heavy toolbox through your front door, pulled the back panel off the set, and got to work. The repair usually cost $3 to $10 depending on the problem, and most of the time it was a blown tube. He tested each tube with a portable device, found the bad one, replaced it, and the picture came back. The whole visit took less than an hour. Television sets in the 1960s were built to be repaired, not replaced. The cabinets were real wood, the screens were small, and the electronics inside were designed so that a trained technician could isolate and fix a single component without touching anything else. Every neighborhood had a TV repair shop, a small storefront with a window full of tubes and antennas and a sign that said something like sales and service. The repairman knew the families on his route the way the milkman and the postman did. He came back to the same houses year after year, keeping the same television running for a decade or more. A comparable repair today, if you can find someone who does it, costs more than many televisions cost new. Most modern sets are not designed to be opened, and when they stop working, they go to the curb. A flat-screen television costs a few $100s and lasts a few years. The $10 house call that kept a television working for 15 years came from an economy that valued fixing over replacing, and that economy is as gone as the vacuum tube. Number 6. A Sunday pot roast dinner for the whole family. A 3-pound chuck roast cost about $1 in the 1960s. Potatoes were 5 cents a pound. Carrots, onions, and a loaf of bread brought the total to under $2. The roast went into the oven after church and slow-cooked for hours while the house filled with a smell that brought everyone to the kitchen before the table was even set. Dinner fed 6 or 8 people, and there were always leftovers for sandwiches on Monday. The Sunday roast was not a recipe. It was a rhythm. Every week, the same preparation, the same slow afternoon, the same family seated at the same table. A comparable pot roast dinner at home today cost $15 to $25 in groceries, and at a restaurant it runs $30 to $50 per person. The $2 Sunday dinner that fed a family and set the pace for the entire week is one of those prices that sounds impossible until you remember that an era when groceries cost almost nothing also produced an era when families ate together almost every night. Number 5. A set of 4 new tires. About $40 to $60 for a full set of 4 tires in the 1960s. You drove the car to the tire shop. The mechanic jacked it up, pulled the old tires off, mounted the new ones on the rims, balanced them, and you drove away. The whole job took an hour, and the cost was less than a week's pay for most working Americans. The tires were bias ply, they wore out faster than modern radials, and they did not grip as well in the rain. But they got the job done for a price that did not require financing. A set of 4 tires today costs $400 to $1,000 or more, and many shops offer payment plans because the price has grown large enough to strain a family budget. The $50 set that kept the family car on the road for a couple of years has been replaced by a purchase that feels closer to a major appliance than a routine maintenance item. Number 4. A washing machine repair. When the washing machine broke in the 1960s, you called the repairman the same way you called him for the television. He came to the house, diagnosed the problem, ordered the part if he did not have it in the van, came back a few days later, and fixed the machine for about $5 to $10. The machines were built with standard parts, and any competent technician could open the back, find the broken component, and replace it without consulting a manual. A washing machine repair today costs $150 to $400, and many repair technicians will tell you honestly that it is cheaper to buy a new machine than to fix the old one. The $10 repair call that kept a washing machine running for 15 years has been replaced by a disposable appliance economy where it is easier to throw it away than to find someone who can fix it. Number 3. A month of electricity. The average monthly electric bill in the 1960s was about $8 to $12 for a typical American household. The house had fewer things plugged in: a refrigerator, a stove, a few lamps, a television, a radio, and maybe a window air conditioning unit that ran only on the hottest days. The meter reader came once a month, read the dial on the side of the house, and a bill arrived in the mail a few days later. You paid it, along with the water bill and the phone bill, and the total for all 3 utilities rarely exceeded $30. A monthly electric bill today averages $150 to $200, and houses with central air conditioning and multiple screens and electric vehicles can push well past that. The $12 electric bill came from a house that used a fraction of the power, but it also came from a rate structure that treated electricity as a basic service rather than a commodity with peak pricing and delivery charges and regulatory fees. Number 2. A day at the county fair. Admission cost about 50 cents for adults and a quarter for children. Ride tickets were a dime each. A corn dog was 15 cents, cotton candy a dime, and a cold lemonade a nickel. You could ride every ride, eat until your stomach ached, play the ring toss and the balloon darts, and walk out having spent less than $5. The fair came once a year, and for many small towns it was the biggest event of the summer. The Ferris wheel lit up against the night sky. The livestock barns smelled like hay, and the midway music carried across the grounds on warm air. A day at the county fair today costs $20 to $40 per person for admission and rides, with food adding another $20. The $5 day that felt like a holiday has become a $50 outing, and the fair is one of the last places where you can see exactly how far a dollar has fallen. Number 1. A week's worth of groceries. In the 1960s, a full week of groceries for a family of 4 cost about $15 to $20. That covered milk, bread, eggs, meat, vegetables, cereal, butter, sugar, flour, canned goods, soap, and usually a treat for the kids. You pushed a metal cart through a store that was a fraction of the size of a modern supermarket, and the cashier rang up every item by hand on a mechanical register. The receipt was short because the prices were small. $20 fed a family 7 dinners, 7 breakfasts, packed lunches, and a Sunday roast with leftovers. The groceries rode home in paper bags in the back seat, and by Sunday the refrigerator was empty again and the cycle started over. A week of groceries for a family of 4 today runs $150 to $250. The $20 grocery run that covered everything a family needed for 7 days is the clearest single measure of how far a nickel has fallen since the 1960s, and that is the full count. 100 things that cost a nickel, or close to it, in the 1960s, and a small fortune today. The coins got smaller, the prices got bigger, but the memory of what 5 cents could do has not faded one bit. Drop a comment and tell us which one hit you the hardest, because every single item on this countdown carries a story, and the best ones always come from the people who were there. Hit the like button, subscribe if you have not already, and we will see you on the next one. Take care.